Ray, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world.
Speech and freedom.
Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr.
Try
Lance
to
O'Neill.
take over the world.
Yo, what up, world? It is your boy, the POGs. Back after a short hiatus, we are back in MAGA land, and holy scamolas, what did I miss? I am so glad to be back. Once again, it's your boy, KJ Bradley, and the greatest chaplain in the world, Mr. Lance O'Neill. What up, Chappie?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm glad to be back from my excursion up the East Coast last week. Thank you for being patient with me, allowing me to make that travel. That was eye-opening. I had to go run down my senators who, fortunately and unfortunately, were having a serious vote that I kind of heard about the day they got to Washington. So they didn't have much, at least my senators didn't have much time for me. I was able to talk to a couple of other senators who were there, and then a couple of House reps, which was pretty cool. So I really enjoyed my time on the Capitol. Man, trying to get into that place is like Fort Knox. Holy school. It is insane. Constituent be damned. You literally have to have a reservation months in advance to be able to get in to see a representative. And I get it. You know, I understand from a security standpoint, but it just seems a little point defeating, right?
Yeah, it's tough when the person you represent doesn't talk to the people that they represent. And that's not, I mean, who knows? I mean, we don't know if, Senator XYZ or House Rep Snuffy is actually doing a lot of meetings with constituents or whatever. But I would be really curious to see what the breakdown, maybe we need to see what their 5 accomplishments for the week are. And
I know, right?
but the bigger thing, but like, I'd like to see some of those stats. Like, how many of your constituents did you meet with this week? What was the total time you met with them? How many hours were you in committee meetings? How many times were you? How much time from votes? How much travel time? Because DC, I mean, if you're going from one side of the city to the other in DC, that could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then you get all the important people who shut down the entire city because they're driving around. And, I kind of laugh. I remember a story, and I'm trying to think of who it was. It was one of it might have been like Tony Blair. And he had a meeting in the US in DC, and he just flew commercial.
Wait, yeah. Oh man, I think we lost.
Lost. Am I back?
Okay. Yeah, you're back.
I mean, I get you need security if you're the president when you've already had 2 assassination attempts, and maybe you have a reason for a 3rd or 4th, or whoever the crazies are going after. But does the junior senator from South Dakota really need a full protection detail? And or the mayor of some of these cities? And Greg, I go back to Greg Easterbrook a lot. We've had Greg on the show. We've got to get it back.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that Greg writes, I agree with. There are things I don't agree with. But one of the things he used to harp on were the low-level government officials that would have these bodyguards and all that. And it's just to make them feel good. It makes them feel important. Yeah. Like in a normal football game, does Nick Saban really need 6 or 8 troopers running around him so he can walk across the field and shake the hand of Bob Stoops? And Bob Stoops, well, he only has 2. So Nick Saban is 3 times as important. I'm going to clean there we go. But, stuff like that, it's kind of silly. And I get it to a degree, but that's what it is. It's just about them feeling important. Could the sergeant major in a battalion or brigade drive himself? Sure, of course. Same with the commander. It's a little different, if they're using Blue Force Tracker in their what are the big trucks?
Oh
Oh
man,
my gosh.
you talking about the LMTVs, the big ones, the big passenger?
No, not the LMTVs, but the ones that they switched
MRAP.
over MRAP, right. So, it's one thing if they're tracking Blue Force Tracker and the MRAP and they're actively doing something, that okay. But there's a lot of times where it's like, oh, we're just going to drive from here out to the firing line. And I get it, you don't want the sergeant major necessarily driving, but at the same time, does he really need someone to be driving him? Probably not.
Yeah.
But a little bit different again when you have Mayor Smith from, I'm trying to think of a little town around, from Waynesboro, and he's got a police escort. Like, really? Do you really?
It's important.
No, you're not. You're not that important. You're just not. Or the student board, these student board meetings when they have all the police. Or Utah just had. I was reading one. Saw a little bit of the video. Two of the reps from Utah held a town hall, and it was funny because the complaint was, you need a ticket, but there's no tickets. The tickets were gone within like a minute of the thing opening up. It's like, well, yeah, how fast do you think Taylor Swift concert sells out in Atlanta?
Oh man, I lost you mid talk. All right, Chappie's out. Hopefully he'll be back. Waiting, dramatic awkward pause. Waiting, dramatic awkward pause. All right, so Chappie might be out for a minute. So until he gets back, I'll kind of talk about some of the things. There you go. You're back. You're back.
How long did you lose me? I think it's my internet.
Right after Taylor Swift. Right after Taylor Swift.
So so Taylor Swift tickets go quick. So who's to say? And there were only like 300 tickets, maybe really active people. But at the same time, when you have these events, you don't think that the debate is randomly open to people for the presidential debates. Of course it's loaded. They already know who's going to be there for the most part. So, but the Utah one, I don't think that was the case because they got shouted down and all that by, let's just say, if you can read a book by the cover, a lot of the people that were in that meeting were not conservatives.
I don't know. Your senator got into a little bit of hot water with his peers.
Who's my senator? I'm not sure who my senator is.
No, senator from Utah. I got to go look up his name again.
Mike Lee?
No, I don't think it was Lee. It was
the other one. Yeah, Burgess, Burnett, something like that. I'll claim Mike Lee. Mike Lee is absolutely a conservative.
Yeah, he's
the other one. Burgess or something like that. I don't really know him. Dude, I haven't lived in Utah since 2005?
No, I know. It's like, well, yeah, but Utah's still your home, right? It's like, you haven't lived there, but
I'm a Utahn. Yes. Although the Army has tried to turn me into a Texan.
Really?
So, I've been stationed almost 10 full years at different times, in 3 years in Houston, 3 years in El Paso, 3 years in San Antonio, and each with change. So
I will say this is not bad. No, I can't find his name now, but
he's like Burgess, I think.
Yeah, he said something to
it's I think it's Murphy. But he was in 2000, he was a Democrat. He led the Utah Democrat Party in like 2000.
What?
And then he switched.
There's a lot of that.
Yes. Yeah. So there was a switch. I think when people are in dead red states, I think they kind of do the Trojan horse thing. Oh, well, I'm still kind of more left leaning, but I can't get elected here. So because I'm a politician, I'm going to lie about what I believe in.
I'm going to switch
and
over.
Then, and then end up switching over and then strategically picking those more left-leaning policies that make more sense to them.
So you're saying this guy's name is John Curtis.
Curtis, is that his name? Okay.
Republican out of Utah. So anyway, he was on.
What did he get in trouble for?
He was on Meet the Press talking about Social Security or whatever, not necessarily getting in trouble, just kind of going against the talking points with Social Security. And he just flat out was like, hey, we're not being honest with our constituents about Social Security, and that's what's causing all the pushback. if we were just to give them an open, honest conversation about what we're doing, they wouldn't be as pissed off about it. But because we're not being honest about it, and because we got guys like Elon Musk, putting out all this crazy stuff about it, and we're not taking charge of the conversation, when we do go home to these town halls, we're causing a lot of undue stress for ourselves. So,
right.
and
I'm
he was just like,
keep going. I'm just changing location.
No, you're fine. And he was just basically saying like, hey, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that, we're out flat out lying or anything like that. What I am saying is we're not being honest when we're saying we're not going to touch Social Security. We have to do something to get the Social Security under control. We have to, if there is indeed fraud and stuff like that in it, we have to look at it and we have to be honest to our constituents. But if we let guys like Elon Musk say that we're going to cut it out completely, that's going to cause a widespread panic, and we got too many people in our districts who depend on it. And if we don't take control of the narrative, that's going to cause us more hurt in the long run. So, which I thought was a great conservative response. I'm like, yeah, just be honest with it. If you say, hey, this is what's going on, and again, I've never had a problem with it. Like I said, I've been pretty consistent on like, hey, never had a problem with it. Bring it to Congress. Let Congress be accountable for it because they're the ones got to vote on it anyway. And just let them, let them live or die with it because eventually they're the ones that got to go back and justify it with their constituents. But, he was getting pushed back about it or whatever, saying, oh, I think a couple of more hardline Republican senators came out and said, well, he doesn't speak for everybody. And, does that, sure. It's just a bunch of talking points and bullshit rhetoric. But it's just, it's funny when you find those true moderates and those true conservatives and those true traditional liberals, and they get cannibalized by their own party by being
sure.
Man. And it's just like,
well, on both sides. Yeah. I mean, how many people now are? I read there was a cartoon today. It was like, I think it was a political. It might have been just something like, how far left has the Democrat Party gone when Chuck Schumer isn't far enough left? Well, that's so.
Schumer made his own bed, man. Like I knew he was.
I'm not a fan of Schumer, but
I knew he was going to cave. Like Schumer knew he was going to cave. He shouldn't have never came out and said he wasn't going to vote. Like if he just came out and been honest from the get go, what he did was he got caught up in the wash. And I always like, don't be who you are. Be unapologetic, right? Don't get caught up in the wash. Schumer always knew he was going to vote for it. He's never been one to fold the government ahead. That's never been his style, his whole career. So to get up there and say, my vote is no, you're lying. I know you're lying. Everybody knows you're lying. You know what I'm saying? So now you done got the whole Democratic, you done got these young Democrats who like, hell yeah, Schumer's going to do it. You know what I'm saying? And then when Schumer does what he always does, it was like, hey, man, we should probably keep the government open because that's in the best interest of the government. Now he looks like he's two-faced when in actuality, that's who he's always been. You get what I'm saying? So
I was talking to him, and this will be right along with what you, and tell me if you think this is what it is with Schumer, because I think it's very similar. It's two sides of the coin. I was talking with an older veteran at Walmart. We talked Vietnam, and we ended up chatting. His chaplain was horrible person, did not do his job well. Anyway, as we were talking, it came around to politics. He said, the one person I don't like, my senator. And I was like, Lindsey Graham? He goes, yeah, that Lindsey guy. I said, it's because he does this. Which way is the wind? And he goes, oh, you have to, that's exactly what it is. That's why I don't like him. Yeah. He just whichever way the wind blows. And Schumer, to be fair, I think Schumer is more committed to the leftist cause than Lindsey Graham is to conservatism. But I do think Lindsey Graham is very committed to whatever makes money go into his pocket.
Exactly.
So, and that's true probably of all of them.
But that's Lindsey and Tim. That's Lindsey and Tim from the gate. Those are two of the griftiest.
Is Tim Scott like that?
Hell yeah. Tim Scott don't have a damn. You could ask Tim Scott what color is the sky blue. He's gonna tell you. Tell me what color it is, and I believe you. Like he doesn't have a fucking policy to stand on to save his fucking life, and that's what pisses me off about him. Like he's a brilliant dude, if left to his own devices. But he's so, I mean, he's the first black senator in God knows how fucking long. So he's
the only black Republican senator in the Senate.
So he's so locked into that he's afraid. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if he's afraid or he's just held to speak his mind to the point to where it's like whatever you say is what we go with. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, dude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair,
garbage.
There is something to be said for all of them doing it. Very few of them are going to say something that goes against the party, and secondly, more importantly, goes against them that is going to be used in the next election. So I think a lot of them, when they have been calculating in 2022, is Trump going to come back? We better start being a little more careful about what we say. And so then with 2004, because that's part of the reason is a lot of them were very anti-Trump. And then when the Republicans showed up and actually voted, a lot of these guys lost. But ultimately, I think we're on the same page. And this goes, to the two POG motto is like, we just want people who are honest and are there to do the job to make the world better. If you go for 2 years and you accomplish nothing and you get voted out, so be it. If you go there for 2 years and you just bend over backwards to get reelected and do nothing, that's worse. And if you go for 2 years and you go against the party because you think the party's wrong and you lose, well, then good. At least you lived up to your morals. But it's such a money driver. I've seen that thing that AOC, and I don't know what I honestly have no idea what her net worth is. But if you think she came out as a bartender and didn't have somebody backing her that was full of money, you're crazy because you can't.
At a bar, but her backer, I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Her and her backer had it out because she completely abandoned her district. Because again,
with the jobs, wasn't it?
Yeah, she was chasing national clout. You know what I mean? It's that.
Oh yeah.
It's like, all right, hey, thanks for getting me there. I got it from here. Like once I'm in the seat, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna pivot on, and then her district kind of fell to the wayside, and that's unfortunate. But
then you know what? Falls by the wayside, but then she wins because it's the name recognition.
Right.
And I really it's tough because it's not just the name recognition, right? If AOC was doing this in a purple area, right? If she was in New York, that was, let's say, right on the border between West Point and the city. So you got, it's still up for grabs. She's probably not going to be quite as hardline, right? But because she knows she's in a safe blue district, she can go crazy. And it's true for Republicans too. Yeah. That's why you have so many what the conservatives would call rhinos, is because you don't get rhinos in New Mexico. You don't get rhinos. You get rhinos in the places that are pretty safe Republican spots, like Utah. You've got this guy who switched over, Curtis, who was in the high up, if not leading the Democratic Party. And then if they don't like where they're going, and then you have the shopping. You have, who was it? Who's the other one? Your Marjorie Taylor Greene, your favorite one next to her, Boebert, was that her name in Colorado?
Yeah. Boebert, yeah.
Boebert.
Where she lost the primary in one district, switched to another damn district, and then I just, that bothers me.
And then she won.
Yeah, that bothers me so bad.
Meanwhile, if your kid wants to go play with his friends in a different school, high school, it's jumping through every hoop in the world because, well, you don't live in the boundaries. And so, well, we can't allow you to move from this school to that school because then it's going to throw off the balance. It's like, what are you talking? Like, we're on the border from one middle school to the next one. And the one middle school that we're assigned to is a good about 10 minutes away. The middle school here is about a 5-minute drive. But the border's there, and unless we have a compelling reason, they're not going to let us change your daughter over there. Even though the high school's basically in the same complex, you have the elementary school, middle school, and high school all right there,
That's insane.
walking distance. But instead, we're at an elementary school 8 miles down the road, or 6 to 8 miles down the road, and the middle school is way down there too.
Yeah.
But a congressperson can switch just by getting the signatures. And then even then you wonder, how are they getting the signatures? Because they have people that they're able to pay and go out. Well, it's okay. They can do it. They follow the rules, you'd think, about getting like signatures, because I've had people come and knock on the door and I've talked to people. And real fast, they understand when I'm like, dude, I'm not even registered here. I'm military. So I'm registered in Texas. They're like, oh, okay. But I still talk to them. But when you're able to switch like that, I don't know. Unless the district is redrawn, can you really put a rule in place that says if you ran in one place, you can't run in another? Because then not really, you can't really do that. But at the same time, it's almost like you just wish people would go, quit carpetbagging. Don't come over to our district. You don't need to be here. You lost. Try again in 2 years. Go on Fox News for the next 2 years. Go make your money and be happy and be a crazy girl that's,
who knows? You might even be a second scenario, sec death if you go to Fox. You'll be all right.
Well, this wasn't Bobbert like caught performing a sexual act with a boyfriend, like during an old fashioned
in the movie theater.
Is that what that's called? I mean, handy is. I was trying to say, but in the theater, and it's like, really? Meanwhile, remember Pee Wee Herman? Pee Wee, he lost everything for years because he was gratifying himself in an
adult theater, no less.
In an adult theater. Did you see in the biography it came out that since he passed away, what was it, a year ago? The biography came out and it said Paul Reubens was gay. No,
I don't know, right? It's like I'm
Paul
shocked.
No,
I'm shocked. I never would have thought.
But does that take away from anything as far as his comedy and his persona as Pee Wee Herman? No, of course not. No, he was great.
I'm starting to realize, especially like being in Washington D.C., like I realize there's a different game being played up there.
That's the majors
here, and it's mind-boggling how it gets disseminated through the airwaves, man. If people, it's hard, man, but if people were to just turn off media and just turn it off, they would realize that they're being played. Both sides, up, down, left, and right. The manipulation that's going on.
But isn't that the catch-22 though? Because without the media, how do you find out on?
Yeah.
Like you and I, growing up in Utah, the closest I could have gotten to DC was getting, we didn't have money. I would have had to get in the car and drive 24 to 30 hours nonstop to get to DC if I wanted to do anything. And it's so impossible to do that. And so that asks a great question. So media is a problem. Media is absolutely a big part of the problem. And that's something that
that question is more complex.
Years.
Yeah, that question is more complex than it seems on the surface, right? Because on the surface, media is not the problem, right? Media is supposed to be the bastion of truth, right? You look at some of the guys like, some of my heroes, Tom Brokaw's, you know what I'm saying? Some of the stalwarts of media, right? They were champions of truth and integrity, right? There was a time when later Brokaw had his situation. I'm saying, let he without sin cast the first stone, right? Real journalist. Thank you. Like, so journalistic integrity was a thing, right? Before
there were individuals that had
Yeah,
journalistic
I'll say
integrity.
there's a difference between journalism and journalist and media entertainment, right? So at some
Sure.
point, in the new century, we there was a shift from media and journalism to media and entertainment, right? So they went from reporting to news to making the news for news entertainment. And the more we shifted to news entertainment, the more it became sensationalized and scandalous. And we stopped focusing on what was really important and started focusing on, all of the BS rhetoric and this, that, and the other. And then that's when you kind of had your tribalistic news channels kind of emerge and this, that, and the other, right? Because that was a time where you could turn on CBS and get a little bit, and you could turn on NBC and get a little bit, and then even Fox back in the day, you were able to get a little bit. And then the tabloids were where you went to go get all the crazy stuff. But now you turn on any news channel, and depending on what show you're watching, you liable to get all kinds of crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that Thad, you make a good point. This is something I've been arguing for a long time, is that it went from who, what, where, when, why to who, what, where, when. We are going to tell you the why that we think, and we're going to manipulate the story to fit the why we believe.
Yeah.
As far as journalism goes, though, yellow journalism has been around forever. I mean, William Hearst made his money off of the tabloids. The New York Times was burying information about the Holocaust and about what was going on with the Jews. And the New York Times, forever, the New York Times in America has kind of been the mouthpiece of what the news is going to be. And that was true. That's true going all the way back to radio, and when TV first started, they were getting we call them the talking points now, but the bullet points is probably more the way to say it. They were getting the bullet points from the New York Times. And so
historically it was the same way. I mean, you can go back and look at like we talk about the Lincoln Douglas debates a lot, right? We can go back and look at the presidential races, the congressional races. Hell, Ben Franklin used to use propaganda in the media all the time. That was like the thing. So media is in itself was not without its Hamilton used to do it all the time. Hamilton and Burr used it all the time to slander one another. So the media as a propaganda vehicle is nothing new. But what I'm saying, there was a line where you had journalistic integrity when it came to reporting the news, right? There was opinion pieces where you were able to kind of sway the public with your own, hearsay, this, that, and the other. And that was left for a section. But when it came to reporting the actual news, that was kind of left, as a unwritten, say, okay, here's the black and white of, and then we'll let you kind of decide, and then here's the opinion pieces of it.
I guess you can say that, but there are definitely examples of where that's not true either. Now, I know I've used this example lots of times, but the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War, the Tet Offensive was a ceasefire over Christmas, which coincided with the Tet holiday in Vietnam. And there was a truce called no firing. During the holiday, we're going to stop. And the night of, I believe it was the night of Christmas Eve and Tet were the same. The North Vietnamese launched a massive, massive attack against the U.S. troops. And the U.S. was completely caught by surprise and still absolutely dominated the North. The body count was 20 to 1. Mm-hmm. So for every one U.S. soldier that was killed, 20 North Vietnamese and Chinese, but mostly North Vietnamese. Tim Brokaw, now you got Brokaw in my head. No. Walter Cronkite, Uncle Walter, got on the news that night and said, "This is a new war. This is because of this. The United States was completely caught off guard, and this is now the turning point. And this might not be a winnable war." instead of now, you can say, well, Cronkite was just sharing his opinion. He was just sharing the news. If Cronkite had gone on, though, and been honest with the American people and said the U.S. was caught off guard, however, they absolutely held their own and they dominated the North Koreans. And this is just another battle that the United States has won. The United States has never lost it. The U.S. never lost a battle in Vietnam. They lost the war. And in part, what he said that night turned public opinion against that war more than pretty much anything else. And so, yeah, there's circumstances, but you can go from there to it wasn't Brokaw. Who was the other one that got fired for lying about George W. Bush's record? He used the false records from the National Guard. He was trying to get George W. Bush in 2004. Not Brokaw, the other big Dan Rather. That's what he got fired for. Remember? And then you've got, you've got Williams, who lied about he did the Hillary Clinton thing. Oh, we flew in and sniper rifles, and it's like, what?
Look at me. I'm black. You don't have to convince me that the media lies. Okay? I get it, right?
But I'm not talking just to you.
I mean, from a black man stole my baby to, you know what I'm saying, to the welfare queens. Like, we can go all the way. I get it. Like, I get it.
I dingo ate my baby.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the media has never been a friend of ours, and I get it. But there is still a respect. You know what I'm saying? And that's that weird dichotomy that we have with this love-hate relationship, I call it.
You know, that's interesting. I'd be curious if you went back and you looked at, and I'm going to use this word because that was what they were called back then, the Negro newspapers, right? The Negro papers that Washington wrote for, that, you know, before Du Bois came on the scene, but some of the Frederick Douglass wrote for. I'd be curious to go back and see how much of that was propaganda versus here's what's going on, and how much they were covering, because I know a lot of these black newspapers were definitely reporting on things that were going on in the black community that the white newspapers sure weren't.
We from the research that I've done independently, there was a certain cast of there was two competing thoughts within the black community around that time, right? And a lot of it kind of bounced off of the whole Du Bois versus Washington line of thinking, right? And it's basically, do we acquiesce and blend, or do we, separate but equal? And that's kind of always kind of been the case. And then depending on where you fell in line, that was kind of where you went, for your media. I would say, before this administration, the National Archives had a very robust catalog that was really dope. If you get a chance, though, the South Carolina Museum of African American History has an amazing catalog on all that stuff. If you guys ever get a chance, man, go check it out. That stuff is super dope. But Frederick Douglass wrote some really amazing opinion pieces on the matter about how Reconstruction, his idea of Reconstruction, how he saw it worked out, which was really, I didn't realize how behind the scenes he was intertwined with the Lincoln White House, right? So like he was to Lincoln what Elon is to Trump on an unofficial,
to a degree, yes. Yes,
to
a degree, absolutely.
Yeah, he was able to, hey, Mr. Lincoln, you should probably use black troops. Hey, Mr. Lincoln, that'd be a good time to use black troops. You know what I mean? Like, so I was even in learning that, I was really impressed with the way, like, I was surprised with the way that he was able to at least voice his opinion. Now, not saying that Lincoln listened to him all the time, because he had his own thing, but he was still able to have a respected voice in the administration to an extent. I mean, to an extent, which was really dope.
And he founded, I'd forgotten, the Black Star was what was throwing me off. He founded the North Star.
Yeah,
And
North Star.
so, so he was in charge of that and published that, the editor, for a long time. The first black newspaper was Freedom's Journal, established in 1927. I want to say it was in New York. Yes, in New York. And it had a weekly circulation of about 50,000 by Samuel Cornish and John B. Russworm were the first owned and operated. So I'm curious, like, if you went back and went through, let's say, the North Star, how much of that was, and I'm sure Frederick Douglass was using it to push the black cause, which understandably so. But I also wonder how much they were reporting on things that were going on in the black community that just, wasn't covered, whether it's a murder or rape or, assaults or whatever. If it'd be interesting to see kind of what they had that wasn't in the white newspapers, because again, the New York Times absolutely being the standard bearer. Yeah, they were still picking and choosing and very actively not reporting things. So it's been going on forever. And that's where, like, there's so few, like, I really like, and I've said this on here several times, Cheryl Atkinson. I really like her. I think Greg Easterbrook counts. He might not count himself as a journalist, but I think he qualifies as a journalist. He does a lot of things that at least kind of fall under journalism. He's an opinion writer and a story writer, but he covers stuff in a way. He writes about things that are, I think, pretty interesting. I think Drudge, I'd like to think that Drudge kind of started off with a journalistic mentality. But I think there was a point where Drudge, I don't know who pissed him off, but there was a point where he went, I'm going anti-MAGA, and maybe it's just because it makes him more money. But Matt Drudge, for a long time, was seen as a kind of a middle ground where you had both sides. And now you go on Drudge Report, and it's definitely center left, much more than it was, I think, dead center. And you had Breitbart, he, absolutely a conservative, right? But one of the things that I thought was interesting was how you only have, the certain media is one way or the other. So print media and especially the networks and all that before Fox News came around, almost all of them were left leaning, right? Center left. And then Fox News come along, pushed it on the right, and that's fine. But again, one versus how many. And with talk radio, though, it was the complete opposite. It was almost impossible to hear any left, and it still is. You talk about AM radio, the equivalent of AM radio, between Rush Limbaugh and Hannity and those guys.
Dominated radio.
Yeah. And they still kind of do. I mean,
even in the podcast space, yeah.
Well, the podcast is interesting. Did you see that one that went around that was saying the left needs to get better with podcasts, and here's the right, and here's the blue and the reds, and it was how big they were. And they had Joe Rogan as this big red one in the middle. It's like, Rogan is not a conservative. Rogan at best is libertarian. And they had Russell Brand. They had Russell Brand as red. Russell Brand hates Republicans.
That was a stretch.
Oh, really? Limbaugh, yeah. I mean, I'm 52, so I probably would. I didn't listen to I don't remember a lot of talk radio. I remember Paul Harvey. That was about it with the rest of the news. But
no, Limbaugh was kind of like my introduction, like coming into talk radio. So anything before then was like I was local radio before then. So
well, yeah, and before that, I mean, in the 80s, if you listen to AM, you weren't listening to AM for anything, to me at least, other than sports. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, Liberty. I got to admit, like, I mean, in the 80s, I was also a teenager, so I wasn't exactly jumping online to listen to the stock reports. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was left. But again, that's where I say the media. And Limbaugh definitely was a pioneer in pushing conservative and becoming arguably the biggest voice in radio. I mean, for years, him and Stern, but even Stern never got to the level of Limbaugh.
Yeah, Stern was cool because Stern was like unabashed, like, hey, I'm an entertainer.
Limbaugh he's just crazy. He was a shock jock. Yeah.
I like Limbaugh because Limbaugh was he would tell you that I am an entertainment commentator. Like he will straight up tell you, hey, I am an entertainment commentator. You know what I mean? Like unabashed, like this is what I do, and I do it for entertainment purposes, and people will take it as
Yeah.
law. Like I loved Rush Limbaugh. Like I loved listening to him because the dude could deliver a story, man. Like he was a storyteller. Like have you that was another one. Was it I gotta remember. Speaking of me, you bring me up. Yeah, Larry King too was what I only remember hearing stories of that. I never really heard him on the radio. I only heard stories of Larry King, so I don't remember what his content was.
Yeah, I remember Larry was on TV since he was 115 to 190 years old, so he was there for a while. But yeah, I think it's interesting just in terms of the radio guys like Limbaugh. Yeah, he came on. I'll tell you when Limbaugh lost me a little bit, and it was the part. Now, and I get it; it was his job to do this. But when they were debating the Brady bill, now, and again, I am a true blue conservative. I have been since I was young. I've never been leftist, but I've also been common sense. And so back in the day before the internet was going, and they were talking about the Brady bill, and they were saying we need to pass something so, and you need to have a time to be able to do a FBI check, right? A 72-hour cool down FBI check and all that. And Limbaugh was just ranting and raving about that. And here I am going, I'm in my early 20s thinking, but what's wrong with that? What's wrong with making sure that somebody who's a felon isn't going into a gun shop and buying a gun? What's wrong with somebody who is freaking out because they just found out that their girlfriend was cheating on them, needing 72 hours to go in and cool down? And so it just kind of went from there. And Hannity was the same way. I used to listen to Hannity too. And the funny thing now is when people accuse me, oh, you get all your news from Fox News. I literally have not watched a minute of Fox News outside of watching election results in probably the last 20 years. I'm sorry, the last probably 5 years. And I don't think that I am missing out anything on Fox News because honestly, I can read the New York Times and know what the conservative argument's going to be because I'm a conservative. There's very few things. Now, there might be some more in depth, some of those things, but even some of the conservatives blow me away with how weird they got with the whole Trump thing, becoming anti-Trump. I left the Republican Party over Trump when he was first nominated. But then I was like, okay, as policies go in his first, I liked what the economy was doing. I liked how he was treating soldiers, all that stuff. And so then I vote, and especially the Supreme Court. And I think that when we're looking at what's going on today, we talk about the media being divided between the right and the left. And it's the same thing with the Congress, to take a full circle to the Congress. My sister texted me today and she said, do you know any good military sources that are just deliver the news, like kind of right down the middle? I was like, no, there aren't any. There just really aren't. And so, and part of that is because even if you try to deliver the news down the middle, you're getting all your news from one of two slants, right? So if you're going to say, okay, here's an article about what Elon Musk is doing this week, and you were to take one from Fox News and one from the New York Times, and then you printed them next to each other, I think that's about as close as you can get to down the middle, because there's nobody going in. And as much as people say, well, AI is going to be straight down the middle. Well, unless you're programmers, if you have people who are programming it to be one way or the other, how many times have we seen Google caught with their hand in the cookie jar? Well, it's like, oh, well, if you ask for the Trump assassination, news on the Trump assassination, none of the results come up, or attempted assassination, none of the results come up. And you can't tell me, oh, well, that was just a small issue with the algorithm. No, that is somebody going in and programming it to say, we're not going to cover that. So yeah, I think I don't know who's going to do it. Somebody's going to crack the code for the media at the same point, and it'll probably be AI merging and saying, I'm going to create an algorithm and I'm going to create an AI that reads any story that comes out. It then reads both sides, and then it comes up with a who, what, where, when, why, how, to the most basic, simple terms. And even if it's who, what, where, when, which is not disputed, here's the facts of it, and the why from the New York Times, this is their synopsis, and for Fox News, here's their synopsis. If you do that, I think you could have ads all over the place, and you would make a absolute ton of money from it.
Dad, I don't know if you're listening, but Chappie just gave us $1 million AI idea. We can get a developer on that one.
Billion. That's $1 billion.
I think that will absolutely slap, because you have a treasure trove of independents and people in the middle who are just tired of the bullshit on both sides. It's just like, yo, I'll make the decision. If you just give me the bottom line, I'll make the decision on my own. Just give me the information.
If you're using the AI to do it, so if you think about it, like, you have such a broad spectrum, right? So far left, it used to be Washington Post, and the Washington Post with Bezos, I think, kind of did the Trump correction. So while they're still left, they're not as far left, right? But I think if you had an algorithm that could go in and say, and you could probably do it, because the way AI works, like, you could even do it on a local level. Let's say Salt Lake. Okay, Salt Lake City has the Salt Lake Tribune, which is definitely a left-leaning newspaper, and the Deseret News, which is definitely a right-leaning newspaper. So if they both cover, let's say there is a shooting in Liberty Park in downtown Salt Lake City, and AI is able to go in and say, here's what the Tribune says, here's what the Deseret News says. The who, the what, the where, the why are all the same. And then it synopsizes, this is what the Deseret News has as its synopsis, and here's what the Tribune has as its synopsis. Then you as a person are able to go, okay, here's what they both are. That means this is probably what's true about the why. Because if I can get what they both think, I can probably find out, or I can probably think about it for myself. And that's true for, now maybe it's going to be tougher if you're in, BFE, Georgia, that doesn't have more than one newspaper. Like, I think the Augusta Chronicle is here. I don't know if there's another newspaper than here.
I think that's it.
Yeah. So, and that it's the prompt. So the question would be, if you could do the prompting to where you are generating it in terms of finding the sourcing, and you have to get the right combination, I think, of the sourcing, because you can't have Fox News on everything. Like, Fox News can't be the only conservative, because Wall Street Journal, I think the Wall Street Journal does a pretty good job of being fairly center-based. I think they're probably more center than just about any other major news organization. But at the same time, you still can read things in the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal, that are pretty far right and pretty far left. It's not always right down the middle.
Wall Street Journal and balance it with the Financial Times, and then, like, between the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times, I get a pretty good, robust picture of everything, and then I kind of branch out after that, and then after that is kind of where I go left to right.
So I don't know. I don't know, Liberty. I think that as far as for hard news,
they slammed. The Wall Street Journal slammed the hell out of the left a lot. I don't know.
And I think what you also find is that as you go up the ladder from local to national, the more leaning you get, right? If you open up page 13 of the New York Times about the city section, right? There's not a lot of slant about the fire that happened on the 13th block in Manhattan. Same thing with Los Angeles, the LA Times. You go on, and the stuff about the fires is pretty straightforward. And it's when when it starts getting into some of the hot button issues, there you go. So that's a great one. That's a great example. So when you look at immigration, and if you're saying, okay, here's the numbers that came across the border, and here's some of the challenges, then you can get straight up information, straight up numbers. But then when you start saying the why, and that's where the problem comes in. the why. If you want to say, here's the numbers, here's what's crossed up, here's what, and then when you get to the why is, well, who's to blame? Is it law enforcement? Is it the policies? Is it not only that, but what's drawing people here? So the Biden administration would say, oh no, the increase, we shut down the faucet, and there were, by the end, our numbers were lower than Trump. Yeah, after 3.5 years, because you let everybody in that said, I have a problem with the country I'm in. Can I come in? And they said, yeah, come on in. Right. So when you get to kind of the more political stuff, but again, the Wall Street Journal is not going to have issues when you say, here's what Google did today. Here's what Tesla announced for their next quarter. This is what we're forecasting. I don't think the Wall Street Journal is 60%. And I do think the editorials, that's where you get into problem. And you even see it in sports. I know a lot of people on the right are saying that I don't watch SportsCenter anymore because it's become a left leaning. I got to admit, I haven't watched SportsCenter in 10 years, but I know some of the stuff you read some of the things that have gone on with some of the reporters, and you gotta wonder about even things like ESPN, which should be just sports, but the politics have played a part there. I saw what just flashed, the end of the Department of Education.
Let's go.
The Department of ED.
ED. You ready? All right. Yeah. So DOE is energy. So I learned that in my research. Department of Education is ED. So 47 signed an executive order essentially stripping down the Department of ED to its bare bones. Most are signaling, thinking that it may be the end of the Department of Education as it stands. I don't know. I got my thoughts, man. But as the educator, I will acquiesce and let you take the lead, and then I'll come in behind you based off of your thoughts, man, and see what you got going on. So how do you feel about it?
I think that the report card from the national went in 1979 nationally to, it was somewhere around a C to C minus for the overall education of our country. And then we spent how many trillions and trillions of dollars, and now we're at a D plus. So we've gone down. So you got to wonder, what is it about? The Department of Education obviously didn't help. I think there's a lot of problems with the school systems. I think there's a problem with the unions. I think there's a problem with the way that our schools have increased non-teachers disproportionately compared to teachers, where the enrollment has gone up. What is it? The overall enrollment of students has gone up in the last 30 years, something like 18%. The number of teachers has gone up 20%, and non-teachers has gone up 600%, some ridiculous number. But then the question, and this is where perception comes in, and this is where we need more information, because those numbers that go up for the non-educators, when I've been in the high schools, they now have these specialty teachers, specialist teachers, who they are in charge of 2 or 3 kids that are autistic or some level on the spectrum. And so they basically are there to make sure they get to class, and they sit in the class too, right? They don't teach. They are student herders. I've got these 4 kids. They're on an imaginary leash. Let's go. We're going to class. Hey, all 4 of you, we're going to class. All right, all you 4, sit down. This is what we're doing. Listen to the teacher. And this is elementary school, middle school, and high school. I don't know where those come in as far as the funding goes. I don't know if those count as teacher funds.
No, those are your idea. Those are your idea students. So those are funded by the DOED.
So, but my question is, as far as the number of hires, when we're talking about the hires, do those count as teacher hires, or do those count as non-teacher hires? Because while I sit there and go, well, how do you have so many? Because, hey, I've been in these high schools, they have 4 or 6 media experts in the library. These kids aren't checking out books. They sit in the library and they eat their lunch in there, and otherwise it's a desert. I've walked through during the planning hours, and there's no kids in there. They're not using any, They're certainly not checking out books, but now you have 4 to 6 media experts. And then, that's my question is, where's the breakdown as far as where does the money go? Because you go back to Malcolm Gladwell, right? And you look at some of his books and some of the interesting arguments he makes. It's not about just throwing money or the class size, some of those things. Like, is there really a big difference between? So let me ask you this, KJ. If you have a teacher that is teaching 15 students, and you have a teacher who's teaching 25 students in their classroom, should the teacher that has 25 students in her classroom make more than the teacher that has 15?
Well, it depends, and I don't think either one. I don't think it should be based off of class size. I think it should be based off.
I don't either. But that was
performance. But then again, it gets into, well, what's the performance evaluator? And then if we go into, I'm not a fan of standardized testing either. I don't, because I think, when we got into the whole standardized test thing, I think we got away from educating as a whole to teaching for the test, right?
Teaching to the test. Yep.
I think that's kind of what affected the downward slope. But that's beyond the point. I don't think people have a fundamental grasp of what the Department of Education role is, right? And it's smoke and mirrors, and this administration is doing a masterful job with smoke and mirrors when it comes to confusing the populace, right? They love to make a boogeyman out of everything, right? Everybody likes to talk about funding and the Department of Education is getting in the way of funding and this sort of thing. The Department of Education at its best is responsible for 10% of your school's funding. At best, at most is responsible for 10% of your children's funding. What they are responsible for is what you talked about, those IDEA, right? Individuals with Disabilities Act, right? That's what they're responsible for, making sure children who are disabled or children who have special needs can be accessible to schools. Basically, so if I could break it down, what the Department of Education is essentially there for is to say, hey, you can't discriminate against people with disabilities. You can't discriminate against people because they're a different race, color, creed, or gender, right? And we're here to make sure that you don't do it. And oh, by the way, hey, we need you to report to us every year so that we can keep a track of what you guys are educating. That's your job. We take that report, we give it to Congress, and then Congress says, okay, cool, you guys are doing your job. That is it. The primary responsibility of the Department of Education is to push out loans to college students, right? So on a local level, K through 12, and then I posted links for you guys who are following along. The links, if you click the links inside the book, it'll tell you exactly how K through 12 is funded and the percentages, right? Basically, the Department of Education is essentially there to make sure, one, hey, discrimination is not taking place in these state schools, right? That is our primary focus. Our secondary focus is to make sure that students who need access to college can go to college. And we do that by providing funds. So those are their two main responsibilities. Everything outside of that belongs to your district and state level, right? So your state and your local are responsible.
Let me ask you a potentially unpopular question.
Sure.
Should there be discrimination?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Here's why I say that. When you have children,
again, the feds are not in your schools. Did you not hear anything I just told you? The feds are not in your schools. That is a local and state requirement. Click on the links.
Hold on,
Go
KJ.
ahead.
Let me ask you this. And Liberty, give it a second. See if this makes sense. Thad, hold on. I know you're jumping to the racial. That's not my point though. And it could come into play. So let me ask you this though. if you have a child who is on the bottom of the intellectual scale,
Mm-hmm.
who potentially has behavioral issues,
Mm-hmm.
who does not is really not able to regulate their behavior in a way that makes it conducive to them to be in a classroom, should they be in a classroom? Because I'll tell you right now, they are.
Right.
And I
But that's
understand. I understand the thought of, well, now you're discriminating if you say they can't be in the classroom.
no. That's
But
not discriminatory at all. That's not discriminatory at all. Because if the school board is allowed to do their job as they're supposed to, what they're supposed to do is identify the behavior problems, report it to the social worker, and the social worker, in tandem with that parent, is supposed to come up with a individual education plan for that student, right? If it's done properly. If it's done properly. However, what's happening is there is a lapse. It's not being done properly. So what you got is you got a bunch of badass kids disrupting the students and the learning in the schools. So yeah, no, I'm completely familiar. So no, that's not discriminatory at all.
Absolutely it is. Because if you say, as this kid shouldn't be in school, and you don't give them every hoop that has to, if you're not following every federal regulation. Now, listen, I recently spoke to somebody who is in education at the principal level. One of the biggest problems they have is that they are so worried about so many, what you just said, federal guidelines and federal regulations, because they're so worried about the funding being strict if they don't meet all of those regulations, right? Now, so Thad, I'm not saying anything about the boys that it being skin. I don't think it's necessarily based on skin color. I think it's much more based on socioeconomic, because if you have white, black, brown, whatever, if the kids are generally poor, they don't have some of the benefits that go along with good nutrition, with good leadership in the school, two parents in the house, all those things that go along, right? But what we've done is, by saying every kid, basically, every kid, no matter who they are, no matter how they perform, no matter how they act, has to have the right to be in elementary school, middle school, or junior high. Because if you don't put them in regular elementary, the regular elementary school down the hill. And look, I'm not talking about the ones that just need a little bit. I'm talking about the ones that really.
Again, let me stop you, because that's not a federal. Again, that is not a federal mandate. That is not. What is a federal mandate is the food program that was amended by this president, right? So when we talk about the nutrition issue, that is something we can talk about, because that is a federal food program, right? The federal funding for the food. However, that is dependent on your state requirement, right? So you're talking about this kid having to be, he has to be in school. Those truancy policies are set by your local school boards.
I'm not talking about truancy. No, hold on.
You're talking about him having to be in school.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the parent says, hey, I got to go to work. The single parent says, I got to go to work. My son, he deserves to be in the school. I don't care if he can. Friends of ours, okay? Yeah. Military family, white.
Mm-hmm.
Their daughter took a pair of scissors and, while the teacher wasn't looking, cut up the teacher's coat. Now, this was years ago. This was 15 years ago. They would not kick her out. They did not suspend her. They didn't do anything because, well, we have to let everybody has. And she was a massive destructive force to the learning of all the other kids, right? So at what point, because you can't just go, oh, well, these kids are performing well, these kids aren't, these kids, and separate them that way. We go by age. And then you have the educators who are so scared and so worried about failing kids.
You're right.
And I get it. We're talking about we're talking about a whole wide thing here between Department of
No,
Education and
you're
lower
right,
level.
but that still falls on the state requirement, because the state says, hey, you have to maintain this enrollment level to be access this funding, right? And then on a local tax level, it says, hey, if your enrollment level drops below 500 kids for third grade level, you're not going to get this tax funding. So again, people will blame that and say, oh, well, the feds are doing this, that, and the other, when in reality, that's not really a federal issue.
But aren't the feds setting the guidelines to start?
No, they're not. That's a state guideline. That is state regulation and a local guideline. That is based off of your state and local. And then that's why I tell people, a lot of people, this smoke and mirrors thing has it confused.
So what keeps so then what keeps the federal, if you remove the Department of Education and it's gone, poof, or poof, but there's this much left because it's a department that was created by the legislature and therefore it can't be poofed completely away, but it can be destaffed and it can be neutered to a degree that it's not going to come back. What stops the state of Georgia from basically doing all the things that the federal mandates had in place?
The only federal mandate that is beholden by the state is to report every year that you have tested your students to a certain criteria set by the NAEP, right? Okay. And then get this. So hold on, get this. The federal Department of Education doesn't even dictate what state. You get to pick. The states get to pick the test. So Georgia and Alabama have two separate tests. Florida has a separate test.
Sure.
The tests aren't even equal. So all they do is maintain the accountability so that they can send it to Congress and say, hey, look, this is where Georgia is based off of the test that they picked, right? And
what that sounds like? You know what that sounds like? That sounds like on Office Space when they say, when the Bobs are there and they say, so what do you do here? He says, well, I take the specs from the customer and I give them to the engineer. And they say, so
again, that's not their role. No, that's not their role. That's like getting mad at that's like getting mad at what? Damn, that's like getting mad at a fish because the fish can't climb a tree. You're upset at the Department of Education for something that is not the Department of Education was set in place so that there could be non-discrimination. Their job is to sit back and say, hey, states, stop discriminating against those little kids in those rural areas. The kids in the rural areas and the kids in the metro areas have to have the same level of education. So you have to maintain a level of testing that is equivalent. That's their role.
And this is the same thing Liberty's point is. And I tell you right now, this is Liberty's point. Let's say Georgia. Why can't Georgia do that on their own? Why can't Georgia say? Because
prior to 1979, we have proven time and time again, states left alone. Look at Mississippi. Look at Alabama. States left alone to their own devices can't do right. That's like asking, well, hell, if we, if we don't need a civil rights bill because, people should be able to do right on their own. People can't even put their own shopping carts back. You know what the right thing is, but people don't.
Do you think things have gotten better though since 1979?
No.
So how much money has been spent on education, in part controlled in part by the standards of the Department of Education in the past 45 years? And if it hasn't gotten better, well, I mean, I don't know. Your argument is, well, don't put it back on the states because historically the states have sucked at it.
No, okay. I'm not saying.
Well, the federal government sucked at it too.
No. What I'm telling you is it's never been away from the states. You guys are blaming the boogeyman that does not exist, and that's the main. I'm saying the main issue of this administration is they're set up a boogeyman once again. This is the DEI argument all over again. You're falling for the boogeyman when you're fighting a fight that does not exist. The states have always been the main driver of education. Your smoke is not with the Department of Education. Your smoke is with your state. What
you said was that the federal government's job is to limit discrimination in
Yes.
part between the big cities and the rural districts,
Yes.
and then to report that they tested.
Yeah,
Right?
and you
That's
asked me
the
about
job of the
funding.
Department of
Yeah,
Education.
you asked me about funding.
Okay, hold on. But what you just said was those are the two things, is making sure that the students in the rural and the urban, the white and the black, all get the same opportunities and that they do a test, right?
That's right.
Okay. Georgia, why can't the Department of Education in Georgia have those same rules in place and says, hey, especially since we're now 45 years past that, we're
Sure.
60 years past the Civil Rights Act, right? Of saying, hey, we are evolved enough as a state and as a culture now that we are not going to discriminate against white kids and black kids. We're going to say that if you're a kid that lives in
DOE does not
Waynesboro,
dictate school standards. Go ahead.
so we're going to, at Georgia, we are going to uphold the standards. So if it doesn't matter if you're in Waynesboro or in Atlanta, you are going to have access to the same level of school, and you're going to pass the same, or you're going to take the same Georgia state test. And then at the end of the year, Georgia is going to report to the Georgia senator or the Senate or whoever you want and say, we did it. Do you need an entire department, cabinet level department, to do that? Or can it be done by the states? Because this is where I look at it. Let me finish the thought. This is where I look at it. The 10th Amendment was there for a reason. And I understand the arguments against the 10th Amendment because that's why we had a civil war to some degree. But we are now 160 years past the Civil War. We're 60 years past the Civil Rights Act. We are at a point where, in general, I would argue, we are much more tolerant of each other as people, racially especially. Now, politically, not so much. I think politics has kind of replaced the racism, right? The blue hates the red much more than the white hates the black and the black hates the white. I think that's much more the case these days. But I think that that's why when you go back and you say the states are the ones that should be doing this.
That's what the problem is right there. And I'll get back to that in a minute.
Which?
I'll get back to that one right there. Our fear is that future leftist presidents will use DOE to make all schools woke. So again, chasing the boogeyman. But go ahead and finish your thought, because I want to solve.
That was the thought.
So here's the thing, right? Your issue is twofold, right? You say, well, how do we know the states are going to do the right thing? Because we got 40 plus years of case studies saying that they won't, right? You said since 1979, our score levels have been going down, right? Right. And I just told you, everybody wants to blame the DOE, right? Oh, it's the DOE. Well, the DOE done it. The DOE did it. No, all the DOE.
Not me, by the way.
No, I'm just saying. No, the national rhetoric is, oh, because of the DOE, all test levels have been going down. The only thing the DOE done since its inception is saying, hey, every year report your findings to us so that we can give it to Congress so that we can have accurate reporting. So we can't sit back and say, well, how do you know states are going to do the right thing? And then sit back and say, well, it's the DOE's fault. All the DOE does is report the data that the states are in charge of implementing. The states have a now. If we were to blame the DOE, you would have to say, okay, DOE, we have one standardized test for all 50 states, and then we have empirical data to say, okay, cool. This is the one standardized test. Now we can now all the matters factor. But because you have 50 individual tests that are based off, that changes with the wind depending on how they want to do it, and the stats matter, and the stats bounce based off administration, wherever region or whatever, there's no way you can do it. You know what I'm saying? It's all state led. So you can't be mad at the DOE for something that the states control. And you say, well, how do we know the state? How do we know the states can't control it? Well, the states have been controlling it since the inception of the DOE. All the DOE has done is compiled the data and reported it. So everything that you're upset about being the DOE nationally, you're really upset that the states have been mismanaging it. The states have been mismanaging the funding. The states and the districts have been mismanaging. The states have been mismanaging. Yeah. None of that is controlled by the DOE. None of that. None of that. That's all states and school boards.
Okay. So the Department of Education has 41 as of now. They're cutting it, of course. When President Trump was inaugurated, the department workforce for the Department of Education stood at 4,133.
Sure.
After recent, quote unquote, it said today's action. So the recent actions, the workforce will be roughly 21,083 workers. Okay, so about half. Okay. With a $68 billion budget. Okay. So to me, if the states can do everything that the Department of Education can do, and that means you're saving, let's say they're only going to cut half of the employees, like the numbers go from 41 to 21, and the budget goes from 68 billion to what's that? 34 billion is half of that.
Sure.
To me, that's still a win for the American people, because what you said is it's still at the state level, and things for education, the failure of education is at the state level.
Yeah.
Now, I would say this, though. Because of there's so much that goes in on why the school system is failing. And I don't want to blame, you don't want to blame the kids, right? And I don't think it's necessarily the kids' fault, but the kids are part of the problem. But the other big problem, and I think this goes back 2 generations. You had the kind of the hippie generation that was breaking away from the traditional 1950s nuclear power or nuclear family, you button up your shirt and you go to work at the bank, and to the hippie and you how dare you smack your kids, right? Yeah. Spanking and Dr. Spock and all that stuff. And that's now the grandparent. Those are now the grandparents, because they raised parents who didn't push education for their kids, didn't push the right way to raise your kids, who said, I'm going to just have the kid go to school, and hey, it's the school's job to educate. And now you're one more generation down from that makes it even worse. So yes, the parents are a huge, huge problem, if not the number one present.
We got a little bit of different dilemma in our society, but yeah. So we were systemically. So just to give you a little context, right? Because America likes to do that from time to time, right? America likes to throw a stone and then pull their hands back and be like, "Oh, what the hell happened?" Right? So in the 1980s, this guy named Reagan. Not sure if you're familiar with him, right?
By the way, post that. Thad's dead on with that one.
Yeah.
The most recent.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Get rid of critical thinking.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you a peek behind the curtain, right? So in the 70s and 80s, right? In the 70s and 80s, the government did this thing in our community and communities of people that look like me, right? They paid mothers, right? And they took the fathers and they put them in jail. And they said, hey, you don't need fathers. We'll take care of you. We'll take care of you.
That's
right?
That was 10 years before Reagan.
Yeah. No. This is all done.
That was the war on poverty.
No. Hold on. We ain't got there yet. I'm just giving you the backstory before we get there.
Oh.
So, all right. So cool. So now that all the fathers are in jail, right? So now that all the fathers in jail, and you got these delinquent teens with nothing to do, right? So all the fathers in jail. Yeah. So in the 1980s, what do? We hit them with this thing called crack, right? And then we go in and we systematically try to wipe out the Black community, right? And we devastate an entire generation in 1980, right? That 1980. Well, you look at it now, that 1980 generation, those are our grandparents. Those are our parents, right? Those are our parents, right? Those kids from the 1980s, those are our 40-year-olds. So now you got a bunch of 40, 30, and 40-year-olds who grew up with our parents trying to learn how to be parents, right? So We grew up without parents, and all we knew was survival because our parents were strung the fuck out on drugs, right? We didn't know about school. We was trying to figure out how to survive, right? So now we're trying to figure out how to put our kid in school. We didn't have structure. We had to put structure together, and it's not an excuse. It is a result. It is a cause and an effect. Because this happened, we are now left with these effects, right? And you have to deal with that. You can't throw a stone and be like, oh, well, why can't they figure this out? Why are all their kids bad? Because we didn't have that. So now it takes a generation of course correction, right? So this generation is like, all right, cool. Hey, we're going to figure it out. So next generation, I suppose the Gen Z guys, they're a little loopy, but their generation will be washed out. Their generation's getting washed out, right? So my kids are growing up with structure. You're starting to see that course correction from the 80s. You're starting to see more fathers back in the house, right? But that took 40 years of course correction, right? So America is implicit in their cause. You can't systemically wipe out a generation of fathers and families for 30 years and then come back and be like, oh, well, hell, why are they schools so bad? Why are they kids so bad? Why are they families so bad? Why are they community so bad? Because for 30, 35 years, you systematically tried to eradicate them from the face of the earth. That takes time to course correct. And now you're starting to see it get course corrected. So those are the effects of what happened. And now we're starting to see it get course corrected. So that sort of stuff takes time, right?
Okay,
so
let me ask you a question then. Yeah. I need to ask you a question.
Yeah.
If that's okay, and I'm not saying that's not the case in the Black community, right?
Yeah.
Then why are the test scores down for the white kids too? Because we didn't have crack. We didn't have.
No, you didn't have crack. But what you guys caught, because crack wasn't contained, right? Crack wasn't contained. It spilled out. But then when it spilled out, you guys ran into that thing called, what was it? What was before meth? No, fentanyl now. It was meth before then. It was meth in the trailer parks before then. Because because drugs isn't, see, and that's the thing. Drugs isn't a race issue. It's a class issue, right? Poor is poor. At the lowest common denominator, poor is poor. But what I'm saying, no.
Socioeconomic.
No. We get that. But what you'll see on TV is they won't show poor white. What you'll see on TV and what you'll hear ghetto queen rhetoric, right? What you'll hear ghetto queen rhetoric. What you'll hear is our ghettos are being destroyed. What you'll see is you'll see my face, right? I'll be the face of poverty. You won't see that other side. Yeah, you won't see that other side.
Is it possible that you see that face on TV and say, that looks like me, because you're more sensitive to that because you are Black?
Absolutely not.
You don't think so? Because because when I'm watching, I'm not like, oh my gosh, look at all the poor Black kids that are just running amok and they're just horrible. I look at it and go, our school system's broken for white kids, Black.
Yeah, but then again,
kids, brown kids, whatever.
Right, but then again, you're also tone deaf to the dog whistles that I told you about. A couple of months ago, I said, hey, DEI is a dog whistle for Black. You was like, no way. You were like, no way. I said, hey, woke is a dog whistle for Black. You was like, no way. No way.
I don't think woke is. I'll agree that DEI has become that, but
it still is.
I don't think woke is.
I'm telling you, but I'm telling you, these things are what they are. I get it. Liberty, you can say that, right? It's that 100 snake theory, right? It's that 100 snake theory again. It's that 100. You never heard the Muhammad Ali 100 snake theory?
No, what's that?
If I'm locked in a room, right? If I'm locked in a room and there's 100 snakes waiting out there to get me, and out of those 100 snakes, 10 snakes mean me good. 10 snakes aren't gonna bite me. Should I open the door and let all 100 snakes in, knowing that 10 snakes is gonna protect me? Or should I just lock the door and keep all 100 snakes out for my well-being? What's the best course of action?
Well, of course, lock all out.
Right. And what I'm saying is, yeah, you may not hear when you hear DEI, you may not hear that. But I'm telling you, that's what it is. That is the tool that they use, right? That is the tool that they use for discrimination. It is what it is.
So, okay, hold on. So
We
we've
got a
talked
lot in
about
the
this
comments. Yeah,
before.
I ain't had a chance to click. We got a lot
we've
going on.
that's okay. We've talked about this before that woke originally came from the Black community. And now one of the ladies that I go when I do my plasma, her mom was one of the founding members, basically, of like the pre Black Panther. And so we had a long discussion. It was really cool to actually talk to her because she was there with her mom talking when her mom was talking about the Black Panthers and the woke and all that. And so we were talking about all that. But I think that the average person, when they hear woke, does not think Black. I really don't think that's the case. I think the average person says woke is leftist. Now, DEI, I think DEI, like you said, has become kind of the racial, hey, DEI, they're Black, therefore. And we've seen examples, unfortunately, like removing the Black Medal of Honor recipient from the website, removing Jackie Robinson. Like, you're removing Jackie Robinson? Who is doing this, you idiots? Whoever the lowest level is removing this needs to be fired. Okay.
They blame it on, they said it was computer algorithm doing that. It's just
okay.
All right.
Well, that again, but then the question becomes who programmed the algorithm. Okay.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
So,
it's like,
yeah. So, but let's go. Final thoughts here. We only have about 4 minutes, right? So I do want to make one point on the education. And it's the teachers and this and that. And part of the problems is we've gotten to the point where we misunderstand things. Like, well, I don't want to be tracked. I don't want the government to know what I'm doing. And so how dare the government have any way to know where I am or what I'm doing? That just, gosh, if the government just stayed out of my business. Okay. Now I make that point because personally, I would like to see a camera in every single school classroom that the parents of that student, now, just like I can go on and I get the code and I can see my kid's report card, I should be able to go in and log in and bloop, there's the history class. There's my son. What is he doing or not doing?
absolutely.
I go in, but they won't allow it because of the privacy stuff. And it goes both ways. A lot of them will say, well, it's the teachers don't want them in there because then they can indoctrinate. Look, it doesn't matter. I want parents to be able to go in at any point to drop in on their kid's classroom and know what's going on. And that it's never been done. I don't think you can do it. I don't think there's anyone that, unless you're talking about something else, but I don't think they allow any cameras in, because like realistically, and I hate to say this, and this would be super unpopular, but if some pedophile is logging in and somehow hacks into the system and is able to watch the kids' class and does whatever they do, that's not harming the kids. I don't want it. I want a secure system. But ultimately, I think the benefit of that, of parents being able to see what's going on in the classroom outweigh the very small possibility that somebody with bad intentions is able to hack in and watch little Jenny or little Bobby scribbling on their paper and somehow is sexually gratified by that. So KJ, you've got the last word. We've only got about 90 seconds.
Boom. Yeah, man. I actually think that's a dope idea. I'm all for it. I think if you could at least play video back, like for a parent teacher conference of your child's behavior, or at least be able to send a video to the parent at the end of the day to say, hey, look, this is the way your child was behaving in class. That would stop a lot of that rhetoric of, no, my child doesn't behave like that. And that would prompt the parent to try to clean up, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we really don't have a lot of that. And then, no, final thoughts, man. No, that's not what I'm telling you, Liberty. What I'm telling you is the administration is telling you that DEI is racism by their actions, brother. That is what the administration is telling you. And I will leave it at that for final thoughts, man. As always, thank you guys so very much. Hey, we are gonna start having guests, man. Listen, we got a lot of guests lined up next week or in the next couple of weeks. A lot of guys are showing interest, so be on the lookout for that, guys. We're gonna bring in a lot of fresh faces in the next coming weeks, man. We can't wait to get back to you guys. I will see you guys next week. Boom. Last thought. All right, and we are out of here. Next week, Doc. Next week. Wait, next week, Chaplain. You good? Next week. 3, 2, 1. See you guys next week. We're out.
Gee, Ray, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
All right, yo, let's get into it.
Try to take over the world. Try to take over the world.
And greatest chaplain in the world, Mr.
Try
Lanson
to
Mill.
take over the world.